Why would someone throw away a gift like that? That's what people always whispered, not just strangers, my own family, especially my father. But no one ever asked what it cost me to hold the violin day after day, when all I wanted was to sketch something beautiful, something mine. If you've ever been told you're wasting your potential, if you've felt the crushing weight of expectations that aren't yours, stay with me. This story will break your heart a little, but it might just put it back together too. Because I went from being called a quitter to standing under the lights at New York Fashion Week, hearing a world-famous designer whisper, "Is this your genius work?" My name is Mia Rivera. I'm 24, a sustainable fashion designer living in Asheville, North Carolina now. But back then, I was just a scared teenager in Austin, Texas. And I was supposed to be the future of classical music. It started the night the applause didn't reach me. I was 14, standing under the heavy lights of the Austin Symphony Hall. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from fatigue. My fingers had danced across the violin strings for 8 straight minutes in front of hundreds of strangers. I hit every note of Tchaikovsky's melody like it was stitched into my bones. When I finished, the crowd stood. People clapped, cameras flashed, and I smiled, the kind of smile you practice, not the kind that comes naturally. My dad was in the front row wearing his signature navy blue blazer, hands lifted in applause. I caught him turning to the man beside him, his voice proud and booming. "That's my girl, the future of the Rivera legacy." And beside him, my sister Sophia beamed at me, her curls bouncing as she clapped. She was 18, already teaching violin at a local music school. She had that glow people get when they're exactly where they want to be, but I wasn't glowing. I wasn't even present. Backstage, the sound of distant applause barely reached me. The room smelled like old wood and rosin. I sat on a metal folding chair, the violin resting beside me, and pulled a folded napkin from my pocket. With a hotel pen I had stolen from rehearsal the day before, I began to sketch a dress. It wasn't fancy, just an idea. A flowing silhouette stitched from upcycled denim cinched at the waist with raw, uneven seams. There were no violins on the fabric, no musical notes, just raw design. The door creaked open. I shoved the napkin into my bag. "Ready for dinner?" Dad's voice cut through. I nodded, standing quickly. But my thoughts stayed behind in that room, wrapped around the napkin now crumpled between my books. Back at home that night, while everyone celebrated with cake and violin-shaped decorations, I stared at the sketch under my bedsheet, tracing the lines with my finger. I didn't know what it meant yet, only that it felt real, more real than anything I'd played on stage. A week later, Dad gathered us all in the living room. The upright piano stood against the wall, and his old trophies lined the mantel, reminders of who he was and who I was supposed to become. "I've spoken with the dean at the conservatory in New York," he began, eyes locked on me. "They're expecting your audition tape by next month." Sophia's face lit up. "That's amazing, Mia!" I forced a smile, heart pounding. My sketch pad lay hidden beneath a pillow upstairs. As they debated which concerto would impress the most, I sank into the sofa, fingers tugging at the edge of my sleeve. All I could think was, what if I said no? I didn't know it then, but that question would tear my family apart. And even as I nodded along, pretending to agree, pretending to want it, a seed of doubt was growing inside me, watered by sketches on napkins, fed by late-night Pinterest boards filled with fabric swatches and color palettes. I still remember the weight of that moment. Not because of what was said, but because of what I couldn't say. I was their prodigy, their promise, their investment. But I wasn't sure I believed in the promise anymore. That night, I stood in the hallway, watching my dad sip red wine and hum the second movement of Mendelssohn's concerto, unaware I was behind him. Sophia practiced upstairs. The house buzzed with purpose, and I felt like a ghost in my own home. I tiptoed back to my room, closed the door quietly, and turned on my desk lamp. The warm light spilled across the sketch pad. I flipped to a blank page and drew. A dress made from discarded curtains, a jacket sewn from old denim, a pair of boots pieced together from thrift store belts. It didn't make sense to anyone else, but to me, it was the first time I felt like I was composing my own music, just with thread instead of strings. I held the sketch pad to my chest and whispered, "Maybe this is still art. Maybe this is mine." But I knew If my family ever saw these drawings, they'd see betrayal. Because they didn't see fashion as expression, they saw it as quitting. And maybe on some level they were right. Maybe I was quitting. Or maybe I was just beginning something else. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet rebellion would lead me down a path I couldn't have imagined, one filled with silence, struggle, and eventually a moment on the runway that would leave my entire family speechless. But first, I had to break their hearts, and mine. I had rehearsed the words in my head 1,000 times, but nothing prepared me for how my father's face would change when I finally said them out loud. It was the fall after my high school graduation. I stood in our kitchen, the one with the yellowing linoleum floors and the cracked window above the sink, clutching my sketch pad like it could protect me. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in slanted lines, slicing across the counter where a half-eaten bowl of grapes sat untouched. My palms were damp, my throat dry. I could hear Sophia's voice humming upstairs, and my father, his back was to me, stirring coffee with slow, rhythmic clinks against the ceramic mug. "I need to tell you both something," I said louder than I meant to. Dad turned, spoon in hand. Sophia leaned against the doorway, curious. I cleared my throat, my voice barely held together. "I'm not sending the conservatory tape. I'm not going. I'm applying to fashion school in New York." The silence was immediate, dense, like someone had sucked the air out of the room. Dad blinked slowly as if I'd spoken in another language. Then he set the mug down with a sharp clink. "You're... what?" His voice didn't rise, not yet. It trembled with disbelief. "I want to design clothes, sustainable ones. I've already applied for a program." "You're throwing away everything." His voice cut across mine like a blade. I flinched. Sophia crossed her arms. "Mia, come on, this is a phase. You love music." I did, I still do, but I love this more. Dad's face darkened. The vein near his temple pulsed. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? The Rivera name means something. You were born to play." "No," I said, voice cracking. "I was born to choose, and I choose this." He slammed his fist against the table. The sound rang through the kitchen like a gunshot. "You're a coward," he spat. "Afraid of failure, that's what this is." I felt my knees wobble, but I didn't move. He turned to Sophia. "At least one of my daughters still has a spine." I opened my mouth, then shut it. What could I say that wouldn't break us further? Sophia said nothing. She didn't meet my eyes. That night, I stayed in my room until everyone was asleep. The shadows from my desk lamp flickered against the walls. My sketchpad was open in my lap, but my hands didn't move. All I kept hearing was his voice. Coward, coward, coward. Was I? I pressed my forehead to the paper and wept silently, so no one would hear. A week passed, then 2. The air in the house changed. Cold, silent. When I walked into the kitchen, conversation stopped. At dinner, my father directed all questions to Sophia. Even Mom, who usually played peacekeeper, avoided my eyes. Then came the recital. Sophia's big night. I almost didn't go, but part of me hoped maybe if I showed support, they'd see I wasn't abandoning them, just the path they picked for me. I wore a simple black dress. My sketches stayed folded in my purse. The music hall was smaller than the one I'd played in, but filled with the same scent of polished wood and nervous anticipation. Sophia stepped onto the stage, confident, elegant. Every spotlight adored her. She played Vivaldi like it was an extension of her soul. And in the row behind me, I heard Dad's voice, just a whisper. "Sophia's the real talent now." My throat tightened. I kept my eyes on the stage, even though they blurred. Even though my hands clenched the strap of my purse so hard my knuckles turned white. Later at the reception, I stood near the punch bowl, pretending to be invisible. A group of relatives chatted nearby. "So, how's Mia doing?" one aunt asked, reaching for a cookie. Dad didn't even hesitate. "She's a quitter, gave up on the gift. She's chasing nonsense now." The words dropped like stones into my stomach. No one corrected him, not even Mom. I walked out without saying goodbye. That night, I didn't cry. I just packed. Silently, slowly, sketchbooks, pencils. A few thrifted fabric pieces I couldn't bear to leave behind. I paused only once, at my violin case. The cherry wood still shone, untouched for weeks. I ran my fingers over it, then turned away. I didn't leave a note. They didn't need one. At dusk, I stepped out the front door. The wind was cool, the sky washed in fading orange. The porch creaked beneath me. Somewhere inside, laughter bubbled from the living room. I closed the door behind me. No one followed. As the cab pulled away, I looked back once, not at the house, but at the window of my room. The curtains fluttered slightly. That was the last time I saw home, not because I never returned, but because that version of home died that night. In its place grew something harder, sharper, but also more honest. I wasn't a prodigy anymore. I was something else, and for the first time in my life, I was free. But freedom, I'd learn, came with a price. And in the quiet corners of my new life, I'd pay it, one stitch at a time. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and bleach. It was barely 200 square feet with a mattress on the floor, a secondhand desk that wobbled when I wrote, and a fridge that buzzed so loudly at night it sounded like it was arguing with the darkness. But it was mine. The day I moved in, the August heat clung to my back like wet cotton. My shirt stuck to me as I dragged a duffel bag up 3 flights of stairs in the kind of silence that feels louder than traffic. No one was there to help. No welcome party. No tears. Just the sound of my sneakers scraping tile and my own breath, shallow and uncertain. I dropped the bag by the window and stood in the middle of the room, dizzy with freedom and fear. The walls were bare, the light too harsh, and everything echoed. But my sketch pad was safe in my bag, and that meant I still had something. The next morning, I started working at Bean and Bloom, a tiny coffee shop on South Congress. I didn't know a thing about pulling espresso shots, but I learned quickly. Burned fingers, spilled milk, the hum of the steamer hissing like an impatient snake, that became my soundtrack. My apron smelled of vanilla syrup and old grounds. My hands, once used to gliding over strings, were now stained with coffee and blisters. But at night, when the apartment quieted, I pulled out my sketch pad and drew until my neck ached and my fingers cramped. I wasn't designing gowns. I couldn't afford fabric. I was dreaming in lines and loops, imagining texture. I taped napkins to the wall, pretending they were silk swatches. I whispered to them like secrets. "You'll be real someday." That's how I met Elena. It was a Sunday morning. I was dragging myself through a local flea market, sipping watery coffee from a paper cup, looking for cheap fabric scraps. She was standing behind a table stacked with old jeans, curtain panels, and mismatched buttons. A little hand-painted sign read, "Textiles for tomorrow, sustainably yours." She was wearing overalls splattered with paint, her curls tucked under a beanie. She looked like a walking revolution. "Looking for anything special?" she asked, her voice warm. I shrugged, embarrassed. "Just scraps for practice." She looked me over, the tired eyes, the coffee-stained fingers, the nervous energy. Then she smiled. "Tell me something," she said, picking up a yellowed tablecloth. "If I gave you this, what would you turn it into?" I stared at the fabric. The pattern was faded roses, delicate and old. I didn't hesitate. Bodice with raw seams, maybe an open back. I'd pair it with denim, break the softness. She grinned, tossed me the fabric, and said, "Then let's start something crazy." By the following week, we were holed up in her garage, surrounded by broken sewing machines, piles of torn fabric, and the sharp scent of dust and machine oil. The garage had one tiny window, and it leaked when it rained. But when the afternoon sun hit the far wall, it glowed like amber. That became our work light. We made our first dress from an old curtain and a leather belt. The stitches were crooked, the hem uneven. But when Elena held it up and spun it around, we both laughed like kids. "It's terrible," I said. "It's honest," she replied. "It's a beginning." And it was. We spent weeks collecting discarded clothes, pulling apart seams, watching YouTube videos on couture techniques. We turned my sketches into muslin mock-ups, then fabric prototypes. Every time I threaded a needle, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but direction. One rainy night I wore our curtain dress to work, layering it over black leggings and a worn cardigan. I didn't expect anyone to notice, but an older woman paused mid-order and said, "Where'd you get that?" I froze. "I made it," She smiled. It's bold. I like it. I nodded, heart racing. After she left, I scribbled craft fair on the back of a receipt. A few weeks later, we set up a tiny booth at a weekend market. A folding table, a wrinkled banner, and 6 pieces hanging from a borrowed rack. We priced everything under $30. People browsed. Some complimented. One teenage girl asked if she could try something on. When she emerged from behind our makeshift curtain, she twirled once and said, "It makes me feel strong." She bought it with crumpled bills and skipped away. That night, Elena and I sat on the floor of the garage eating instant noodles, our knees touching. Rain tapped against the window. We'd made $73. Elena held up the last bill. We're practically rich. I laughed so hard I cried, but not because of the money. Because for the first time since leaving home, I didn't feel like a quitter. I felt like a builder. I wasn't sure if my family would ever understand, or if they even remembered what day it was. But I did. It was the day I stopped waiting to be accepted and started creating my own world instead. The next morning, I woke early, sat on the edge of my mattress, and watched the light spill across my sketch pad. I traced the lines of a new design, one that hadn't existed the night before, and I whispered, maybe this could work. What I didn't know was that everything was about to get harder, because growth is never a straight line. Sometimes it takes place in shadows, sometimes in silence, but sometimes it begins with one broken stitch that holds anyway. There's a kind of hunger that doesn't show on your face. It hides in your knuckles, in the way you grip the edge of a table when rent's due and you haven't sold a single piece all week. It shows up at night when you sew until your fingers bleed, just to silence the voice that keeps whispering, "What if they were right?" That was the kind of hunger we lived on. Elena and I found a garage space on the edge of East Austin. It used to be a mechanic's workshop. You could still smell grease beneath the bleach we scrubbed into the floor. The walls were raw brick, the windows clouded from years of neglect, and there was a stubborn oil stain near the back corner that looked like a dragon in flight. But it had light. One tall window faced west, and when the sun hit it just right, it turned everything gold. We called that hour Hope O'Clock. We bought secondhand sewing machines from a school auction. One worked. The other made a strange hiccuping noise whenever it tried to stitch. We named it Gloria. She became our mascot. Every morning before my shift at the cafe, I'd stop by the garage. I'd run my hand across the fabric we'd laid out on a wooden table we'd dragged from a junkyard. Just touching it reminded me why I left everything behind. Our collection grew slowly. Patchwork skirts, asymmetrical jackets, reworked denim pieces. Elena handled the dyeing process. Buckets of beet juice and turmeric stained her hands violet and gold. Me? I just kept drawing, and sewing, and doubting. One Thursday afternoon, I opened my inbox and saw a voicemail transcript from a number I didn't recognize. It was from my father. "Still playing with rags? Come back to music before it's too late." My throat closed. I could still hear his voice in my head, calm, cutting, like he truly believed I was wasting my breath on nothing. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Then, without thinking, I hit play. His actual voice was worse than the transcript. I deleted it. But it stayed with me anyway. That night, I stitched until the sky outside turned black. I sewed like I was arguing with him through thread. Each seam was a rebuttal, each hem a scream he'd never hear. At some point, I must have stopped breathing because Elena touched my shoulder and said gently, "He doesn't get to live in your hands, only you do." I didn't answer, but I kept sewing. Weeks passed, then months. We started using social media, badly at first. Blurry photos, misspelled captions, but people noticed. Local artists followed us. A boutique downtown asked to borrow a piece for their window display. It didn't sell, but it was seen. Sometimes that's enough to keep going. On Saturdays, we returned to the craft fair. People began to recognize us. One woman bought a jacket and said, "You've got something here." We made 10 sales that day, $500 in cash, folded into a crumpled envelope. Elena danced with it, held above her head like a trophy. Her boots thudded against the concrete. I just watched, hands still, unsure if it was real. "This is just the beginning," she beamed. I wanted to believe her. That night, I walked home through the quiet streets. The wind carried a sharp scent of fall, smoke, and dry leaves. I passed a violinist playing on the corner near my building. The notes floated like ghosts. For a moment I stopped. He was playing the same piece I had played at my debut concert in Austin, Tchaikovsky's Melody. I closed my eyes. The air changed. I could still feel the polished wood of my old violin under my chin, the weight of my father's expectations in every drawn-out note, the applause that never really reached me. When I opened my eyes, the player nodded at me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, just remembering someone I used to be." He nodded once, then returned to playing. I climbed the stairs to my apartment slowly that night. Not from fatigue, from weight. Inside, the light buzzed. The room smelled like turmeric again, my hands still stained from dyeing sleeves earlier. I looked around the space. No trophies, no piano, no mention of Rivera, but sketches were taped to the walls like stars, pieces of who I was becoming, and for once I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I was building, quietly, in the shadows, without applause, but building all the same. And though doubt still lived in me, curled in the corners of my mind like a stray cat, it no longer ran the show. Each morning after that, I whispered 3 words to myself: keep showing up. I didn't know then what would come next, the contest, the spotlight, the moment that would change everything. But I knew this. I had something they couldn't take. Not pride, not praise, just grit. And one small dream that refused to die. I still remember the way my finger trembled over the submit button. It was late, past 1 a.m., and the garage smelled like fabric glue, coffee, and metal dust. My laptop sat crooked on a stack of folded jackets, its fan wheezing from overwork. Elena had fallen asleep on a pile of scrap fabric in the corner, her face smudged with ink and exhaustion. The application page blinked at me. Regional Design Challenge. Reclaim the runway. Submit 3 photos. 1 story, 1 dream. The gown lay on the mannequin like a secret waiting to be told. We'd built it from scratch, and not the glamorous kind. The bodice was made from a worn-out quilt someone tossed at a yard sale. The skirt came from 6 pairs of thrifted jeans, each one a different shade of blue. The stitching was exposed, raw on purpose. I wanted people to see the work. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I hovered over the keyboard, hearing Dad's voice in my head again. Still playing with rags? Come back to music. I shut my eyes and pressed submit. The screen flashed. Thank you for your entry. I didn't feel triumph. I felt still, like something sacred had passed through me. The next few weeks felt like holding my breath underwater. Every time I refreshed my email, my heart skipped. Nothing. 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 Until one Friday afternoon, I walked into the garage and heard screaming. "Elena?" I froze. She burst from the back room, her phone in one hand and a piece of toast in the other. "We won!" she shouted, crumbs flying. "MIA! We actually won!" I blinked. "Won what?" "The contest, $5,000. And we're in the Chronicle, look!" She shoved the screen into my hands. There it was, my face, my name, my dress. I stared at it like it belonged to someone else. "Holy crap," I whispered. Elena started dancing around the garage like it was a Broadway stage. "You're going to be so famous. Do you think we should order champagne? Do people like us drink champagne?" I laughed, a deep, almost broken sound. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. This wasn't just a win. It was proof. But even as the joy cracked open inside me, something else stirred. Fear. Because I knew what came next. The phone call. That night, I sat on the mattress in my apartment, staring at my phone for a full hour. I finally typed 1 sentence and sent it to my mother. "Just wanted you to see this." I attached the Chronicle article. She didn't reply. 2 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Congratulations, still not music, but I suppose it's something. Dad." No emojis, no heart, not even my name. I read it once, then again. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but I didn't. I set it down, pulled out my sketch pad, and began to draw. I let the lines speak what my mouth couldn't. The next week, the boutique that had borrowed our jacket reached out again. "I saw your article," the owner, Camille, said. "I think your pieces could do really well in our green thread collection. Would you be open to stalking? I almost dropped the phone. We can't pay much up front, she added, but we do consignment, and we have real foot traffic. I looked at Elena, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while pretending to clean a glue stain. Yes, I said, heart thudding. We're in. After the call, we collapsed on the garage floor, lying side by side like kids staring at clouds. I think this is it, Elena whispered. The start of the start. I nodded, staring at the ceiling where a lone bulb flickered. Yeah, I think so too. The boutique launch happened quietly. 3 dresses, 2 jackets, 1 pair of wide-leg jeans that Elena dyed with avocado pits and onion skins. We visited the shop the following weekend, pretending to be customers. I watched a woman slip her arm into one of our jackets and look at herself in the mirror. Her smile was small, private. That was the first time I saw my work live on someone else. It felt better than applause. Later, as we walked back to the garage, the sun setting behind us, Elena said, "Think your dad would ever come see one of your shows?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I finally said, "but I'm not waiting anymore." That night, I took the $5,000 check from the contest and taped a copy of it above my sewing table, not to brag, to remind myself what happened when I kept showing up. I didn't tell my family when the boutique sold its first piece, or when Camille emailed a month later to say we'd sold out of everything. But I told myself, I told the mirror, I told the little girl in me who used to play violin because she had to, not because she wanted to. And slowly that girl started to believe we could do this. Not out of rebellion, but out of truth. I was still scared, still unsure, still aching from things I didn't say at that kitchen table all those months ago. But I was building something, and the world was beginning to notice. I didn't know it yet, but something even bigger was around the corner. An invitation, a risk, a stage I never dared to imagine. But for now, I let myself rest. I curled up on the floor of the garage next to Elena, the scent of lavender from the scrap bin floating in the air, and I whispered to the dark, "They'll see someday." The invitation came as a text, short, cold, and wrapped in thorns. "Sophia, gala next Friday. Thought you might want to support your family. Unless you're still too busy sewing." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure whether to laugh or throw the phone across the garage. It had been over a year since I left home, since my father slammed his hand on the kitchen table, since they called me a quitter. Now Sophia, the golden child, wanted me to show up for her big night. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I looked across the workshop. Elena was elbow-deep in a new jacket design, denim scraps scattered like fallen feathers. She looked up when she felt my silence. "Something wrong?" I handed her the phone. She read the message, eyebrows lifting. "Wow, bold." "Should I go?" I asked, quieter than I meant. Elena set down her needle. "Only if you're strong enough to remember who you are when they pretend to forget." That hit hard. I turned back to the dress I was hemming, but my hands weren't steady. That week felt like walking a tightrope between 2 worlds. By day, I stitched with purpose, our boutique orders doubling, strangers DMing me to ask about custom pieces. By night, I dreamed of violins and silence and my father's eyes, that empty, disappointed stare that had followed me since the night I packed my bag. Friday came too fast. The gala was held at a historic music hall downtown, one I knew too well. The stone columns, the smell of old wood and polished brass. It was the same stage I'd once dreamed of owning. I wore a midnight blue dress Elena and I had co-designed, recycled satin from old bridesmaid gowns, stitched with silver thread in jagged lightning patterns. My silent rebellion. I stepped out of the Uber and stood at the curb for a moment. The night buzzed with traffic. People in gowns and tuxedos passed by, their heels clicking like clocks ticking down my courage. Inside, the hall shimmered with light and ego. Sophia stood near the center, surrounded by donors and music teachers, her updo perfect, her smile practiced. I kept to the edge where the champagne wasn't too warm, and the air wasn't too thick with false praise. They didn't see me at first. Then I heard it, my father's voice, deep and unmistakable. "She's worked so hard," he said proudly, "so disciplined, unlike others." I felt the words hit like a slap. I turned, heart pounding, and saw him standing with an uncle I hadn't seen in years. I didn't expect him to look older, more tired, but the smugness was intact. Sophia glanced in my direction and froze. She smiled. Tight, professional, then walked over. "Well," she said, "didn't expect to see you in a real dress." I smiled back, all teeth. "Didn't expect to be invited." She looked me over. "Still playing dress-up?" "No," I said. "Just designing the future." Her laugh was sharp. "You always had such a flair for drama." I said nothing, just sipped my champagne and looked away. The performance started an hour later. Sophia played with her usual perfection, not a note out of place, her fingers fluttering like dragonflies across the strings. The crowd applauded with polite admiration. I clapped too, even meant it. But when I glanced at my father, sitting near the front, beaming like a man with everything he wanted, I felt something heavy twist inside me. He hadn't even noticed I was here, or maybe he had. I slipped out early. The night air was cold. I didn't wait for a ride. I just walked, heels in hand, feet aching. When I got back to the garage, Elena was still up, hunched over a new sketch. She looked up, concern softening her face. "How bad?" I sat down beside her, wordless. Then I reached for the nearest pencil and started to draw. I drew a dress with sharp edges, cut from rejection. I added a cape made of unsaid words, stitched guilt into the hem, laced the sleeves with every time they called me a failure. Elena watched quietly, then whispered, "This one's going to hurt in the best way." I didn't cry that night. I worked. Thread by thread, I stitched myself back together. They had chosen their pride. I would choose mine. From that moment on, I stopped waiting for their applause, or their silence. I didn't need either. All I needed was this room, this table, these hands, and a dream they never understood, but that didn't make it less real. 2 days later, I found the gala invitation in my coat pocket. I stared at it for a beat. Then I crumpled it and dropped it in the trash. We had work to do, and I had no intention of looking back. It was a Tuesday when the email came in. Plain subject line, all caps, NUFU, inquiry regarding sustainable submission. At first I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. A flicker of instinct. Or hope. I clicked. The message was short, almost clinical, but I read it 3 times just to make sure it was real. "We are curating a select showcase for up-and-coming sustainable designers at New York Fashion Week. Your collection was recommended to us. Please confirm your availability for our February show. Submission deadline, November 20th. My hands went cold. I reread it. Then again, I didn't move, didn't blink. My brain stopped forming words. I just stared at the screen like it might dissolve if I looked away. Then I screamed. Elena, who had been in the other room hammering grommets into a reclaimed leather vest, came rushing in, half panicked, holding a mallet. "What? What happened? Are you bleeding?" I turned the screen toward her with shaking hands. "Read!" She squinted, then gasped. "No freaking way!" I nodded, still mute. "We're going to Fashion Week?" she whispered. "If we get in," I said, trying to ground myself. No. She grabbed my shoulders, shaking me lightly. "You're already in. We're doing this." I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. It felt impossible. And yet, it wasn't. That night we danced around the garage like kids who'd found a hidden door to another world. We taped the email to the wall above our design table, right next to the $5,000 check from the contest. Then we made tea, chamomile because it was all we had, and sat on the floor in stunned silence. "What if we mess it up?" I whispered finally. Elena looked over at me, her eyes steady. "Then we mess it up trying." But inside, my old fears came clawing back. What if I wasn't ready? What if I failed again? What if this chance, this glittering golden chance, only reminded everyone that I didn't belong? The next morning, we started planning. We needed 15 pieces, all new, all from recycled materials, all runway ready. It was madness. But madness had never stopped us before. By the end of the week, we had the rough sketches taped across the walls like battle plans. We divided the looks between us, set sewing goals, fabric scavenging days, and sleep hours, or the lack of them. But just as we found our rhythm, something else landed in my inbox. A message from a venture capitalist named Marissa Hyde. She'd read about our boutique launch. She was intrigued. "I'll be at NYFW," the message read. "If your line holds up, I'll be offering $10 million in startup funding. Let's talk after your show." $10 million. I sat down hard. Elena reread the message 3 times before her mouth formed a word. "Mia, this is it." "It's pressure," I said quietly. "No," she said, "it's power." But it didn't feel like power. It felt like weight. And then, just when I thought the emotional scale had tipped as far as it could, I got a call from my cousin Rosa. "Hey, just wanted to let you know, Sophia and your dad are flying to New York next month," she said, casual like it was nothing. "He got invited to speak at some music education panel." My stomach flipped. "You said next month?" "Yeah," she said. "Right around the time of Fashion Week, actually. Weird, right?" Weird didn't cover it. I hung up and sat perfectly still for a full minute. They were coming. They had no idea I would be there, that I would be on the stage, not in the audience, that the runway would belong to me, not because someone gave it to me, but because I took it with my own hands. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked gently, sitting beside me. "I don't know if I want them to see me like this," I admitted. "Like what?" "Still, unfinished, still scared." She tilted her head. "That's the best time to be seen, when you're becoming." I didn't respond. I just reached for my sketchbook and began redrawing a bodice that hadn't been sitting right. The days blurred after that. We worked 14, 16 hours straight. Ate over the sewing table, slept in shifts on a pile of unused fabric. I forgot what day it was, what I looked like without circles under my eyes. But the pieces, they were beautiful. We wove jackets out of worn tapestries, used old lace from wedding gowns to create modern silhouettes, turned broken umbrellas into avant-garde capes. Each outfit told a story, of waste turned wonder, of ruin made into resilience. But in the quiet moments, when the machines were off and the room went still, I would hear my father's voice again, that cool disappointment, that smirk that said, "You'll come back when you fail." I started keeping a list. Things they didn't see. Me crying into a sleeve seam at 2 a.m., me gluing soles onto shoes because we couldn't afford cobblers, me learning to believe in silence, not applause. One night, I stood in the middle of our garage, surrounded by half-finished gowns and paper patterns taped to every surface. I turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "This is my moment," I whispered. Not just because of Fashion Week, but because I'd gotten this far without them. Because I was still standing, still sewing, still stubborn enough to believe that I could belong in a room that had never opened its doors to girls like me. I didn't know how the show would go, didn't know if the crowd would cheer or yawn, didn't know if my father would even recognize me under those lights. But I knew one thing, I wasn't hiding anymore, not from them, not from myself. And as I zipped up the final look on the last mannequin, my hands steady for the first time in days, I knew we were ready. Next stop, New York. New York didn't feel like a city. It felt like an inhale, sharp, endless, and laced with static, the kind that charges the air right before a thunderstorm. Elena and I landed at JFK 5 days before the show. 2 checked bags, 1 carry-on, and a hard case crammed with our entire collection. Every thread, every seam, every risk we'd ever taken stitched into 15 looks. The car ride into Manhattan was a blur of noise and light. Horns blared, sirens wailed in the distance, and every billboard felt like it was screaming for attention. I pressed my forehead to the cold window, watching shadows stretch across glass towers. "I feel like I'm dreaming," I said softly. Beside me, Elena grinned. "Same, except in my dreams, I'm not this jet-lagged or stressed." We stayed in a 5th-floor walk-up in Midtown. The stairs smelled like old varnish and Chinese takeout. The apartment had 1 bedroom, a fold-out couch, and a window that rattled in the wind. But we didn't need comfort. We needed time. For the next 4 days, we barely slept. The dining table became a sewing station. The kitchen counter held fabric dyes. Garment bags lined the hallway like soldiers awaiting orders. By day, we adjusted hems, double-checked zippers, hand-stitched tiny patches that had come loose during travel. By night, we rehearsed the lineup, look by look, moment by moment, down to the second. We didn't just want a good show. We wanted to leave the room changed. but sometime around 3 a.m. on the third night, it hit me like a sucker punch. But there was a flaw. One seam on the back panel had shifted during transit. It puckered under the lights. Not obvious to the average viewer, but to me, it was failure, screaming. My stomach flipped, my breath shortened. Suddenly, I was back in my childhood bedroom, fingers trembling over my violin strings, trying not to cry as my father stood in the hallway and muttered, "You missed the crescendo." I dropped the fabric and backed away. Elena looked up from the other side of the room. "What's wrong?" "I can't do this," I said. "Not like this." She set down her scissors and crossed the room slowly. "Mia, it's not perfect," I snapped. "None of it is. They're going to laugh. My dad's going to be there. What if he sees this and just confirms everything he always said?" Elena didn't try to argue. She just sat beside me and let the silence breathe. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Do you know what I used to hear growing up?" I shook my head. "You're too messy, too wild, too much. Every time I spoke up, every time I took space." She looked at the mannequin. "But now people pay to hear me speak. They wear what I create." She turned to me, voice steady. "Your dad doesn't get to decide if you belong anymore. That job's taken. You already gave it to yourself." I didn't answer, but I picked up the seam ripper and began again. The night before the show, we finished the final garment. We stood side by side looking at the complete lineup, 15 pieces, each glowing faintly under the warm overhead bulb. "I can't believe we did this," I whispered. Elena smiled. "I can." The morning of the show, I woke to a call from my cousin Rosa. "Hey, just wanted to say, they're here." My heart kicked. "Your dad, Sophia, saw them walking into the venue with their passes." My mouth went dry. "Did they say anything?" "Not yet," Rosa said carefully, "but they looked serious." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. After we hung up, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The circles under my eyes were darker than usual. My lips were pale, my hands already trembling. But I lifted the lipstick Elena had set out, a deep red she called Victory, and applied it slowly. Then I pulled my hair back, pinned it tight, and whispered to my reflection, "This is yours." The show venue was a warehouse in Soho, transformed into a sanctuary of light and concrete. Runway lights warmed the raw brick walls. A curated playlist echoed through the space, pulsing, intentional. Backstage was chaos. Models getting their hair curled, stylists threading last-minute beads, assistants triple-checking timing. "You're Mia Rivera, right?" I nodded. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "A designer, Anna Rivera." I blinked. "Wait, Anna Rivera? The Anna Rivera?" She nodded. "She asked to meet you, after the show." My knees nearly buckled. Elena's jaw dropped. "She's a legend. I know. Do you think she's related to—" "I don't care," I cut in. "She saw our work. That's all that matters." Just before showtime, the models lined up. The first track began to play, low, steady drums mixed with soft strings. I peeked through the curtain. The room was packed. I spotted them instantly. My father in the second row, jaw set. Sophia beside him, her expression unreadable. I stepped back and smiled. Not out of confidence, out of clarity. They were about to witness everything they tried to ignore. Elena nudged me. "You ready?" I nodded. "Let's begin." And with that, the lights went up. Our revolution walked out into the world. The lights went black. For a second there was no music, no sound, just the tight inhale of an expectant crowd and the low electric hum of a room bracing itself. Then the drums started, slow, earthy, tribal, a low bass that pulsed beneath the ribcage. One spotlight ignited at the head of the runway, illuminating the first model as she stepped out. And just like that, we began. I stood just off stage, fingers wrapped so tightly around a clipboard that the edge dug a crescent into my palm. Elena was behind me, whispering the cues to our assistant. 15 looks, 14 minutes, no room for hesitation. And suddenly, the murmurs started. They were faint at first, pockets of hushed voices, camera clicks doubling in speed, heads craning forward. People were watching, and not politely. They were leaning in. They were hungry. I peeked through the curtain again, heart hammering. That's when I saw her. Anna Rivera, front row, center, legs crossed, red nails tapping the edge of her chair. Her dark sunglasses were off, resting in her hand, a sign that meant everything. If she was holding them, it meant she was seeing. My throat tightened, but then my gaze shifted 2 seats down. There he was, Carlos Rivera, my father. He sat stone still, lips pressed into a thin line. No applause, no reaction, just watching. Next to him, Sophia whispered something I couldn't hear. He didn't respond. I pulled back before my knees buckled. Elena saw the look on my face and touched my arm. "Don't give him your power." "I'm not," I whispered, though my hands were shaking. "I'm just reclaiming it." A cape from burial shrouds. My grief. A halter dress from firemen's uniforms. My resilience. A pantsuit dyed with coffee grounds. My exhaustion, repurposed into strength. The audience buzzed louder with every step. The flash of cameras became lightning. Phones rose. Stylists whispered behind their hands. I saw one buyer nudge another and point to a pair of deconstructed heels made from bicycle tires. It was the one I'd almost given up on, the one with the crooked seam I ripped out at 3 a.m., the one that made me cry, the one that healed me when I sewed it back in. A bodice stitched from broken umbrellas, a skirt layered with scraps from tablecloths my grandmother once embroidered, a veil of sheer organza dyed with tears and turmeric. It didn't ask for attention. It earned it, and it held the room like a prayer. When the final model returned for the full lineup walk, Elena and I stepped forward together. It was protocol, expected, but I was terrified. What if they clapped out of politeness? What if they didn't clap at all? But then I heard it. The first clap, loud, firm, then a second, then 5, then 20. Then the room rose, a standing ovation. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. People were cheering, shouting. Then from the front row, a voice cut through the noise. "Is this your genius work?" Ana Rivera had stood. She was staring directly at me, eyes gleaming. I stepped forward slowly, the light catching the shimmer on my handmade flats. I felt everyone's eyes on me, not as judgment, as recognition. "Yes," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's mine." Her smile was small, approving. Then she turned to someone beside her and nodded. Suddenly, I was surrounded. Photographers angled in, buyers scribbled on notepads, editors murmured about exclusive rights. I saw someone mouth, "Who is she?" and someone else answer, "That's Mia Rivera." And then, he stood, my father, not clapping, just standing, his face unreadable, his eyes locked on me. Behind him, Sophia's mouth was slightly open. Shock, maybe awe, maybe something else. He stepped toward the runway edge. "Mia?" he said like a man waking from a dream. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He looked at me as if seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time since I was 14. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the dress on the model, then back to me. He took a breath, as if to say something, but I turned before he could. I wasn't ready, not tonight, not yet. Backstage, Elena grabbed me in a fierce hug. "You did it," she breathed. "You did it." I laughed into her shoulder, overwhelmed. "We did." The coordinator rushed in. "Ana Rivera wants to speak with you, alone." I nodded, still dazed. "I'll be right there." As the buzz faded outside and I peeled off the adrenaline like a second skin, I looked at my hands, still trembling. Not from fear, from release. Everything they said I'd never be, I just became, but part of me still stood frozen, on that runway, in front of the man who once called me a quitter. Would he follow me backstage? Would he say anything at all? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The room backstage was small and warm, too warm. My skin still buzzed from the lights and applause and the echo of Ana Rivera's words. "Is this your genius work?" Hadn't even faded from my bones. But now it was quiet, the kind of quiet that made your breath loud. I paced by the garment racks, rows of handmade beauty that just walked the runway like fire. Elena stood across the room, clutching her phone, trying not to squeal every time a notification popped up. Vogue, Harper's, BuzzFeed, emails with subject lines like "interested in interview" and "limited capsule collection proposal" poured in by the minute. But I couldn't focus, because I felt him coming before I heard him, the heavy footsteps, the way the air seemed to shift slightly, like it did when a storm cloud moved over the sun. Then a voice, uncertain, careful. "Mia." I turned. My father stood in the doorway, looking older than I remembered. His tie was crooked, his eyes glassy. His hands twitched at his sides like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to open them or shove them deep in his pockets. Behind him, Sophia lingered in the hallway, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't step in. He took a slow step forward. We didn't know that you were one of the designers tonight. I didn't answer. He tried again. Why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes, and for once, I didn't look away. Because I didn't think you'd come, and if you did, I didn't want the noise. He blinked. That landed. He glanced at the gowns, the sketches on the wall, the fabric swatches still pinned to corkboards, my world exposed. This, he said softly, almost like confession, this is extraordinary. Better than playing with rags? I asked, lips stiff. He winced. Mia, I was wrong, he said, about so many things, about you. The words hung there, between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. You said I was throwing everything away, I said, voice quiet. You said I was a coward. I know, he whispered, and I'll carry that. He stepped closer. I didn't understand. I thought discipline only looked one way. I thought passion had to sound like music. But you built something I can't even define. I didn't cry. I watched him, studied his face, the crumpled corners of his eyes, the crack in his voice that used to sound so sharp. And I didn't hate him. I just didn't trust him yet. Sophia finally entered the room. Her heels tapped against the concrete like tension. She looked at me with a strange mix of emotions. Awe, envy, confusion. I knew you were doing something, she said slowly. But not this. There was no sarcasm in her voice, just the dawning realization that I had become someone without her applause. I didn't need a spotlight, I said. I just needed a place to be seen. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it. She stepped toward the garment rack, brushed her fingers over a jacket made from restructured mailbags and velvet ribbon. It's beautiful, she said. You outshone all of us tonight. I nodded once, not out of pride, just acknowledgement. Then, softly, she added, I think I was jealous. I looked at her, really looked. She wore the same expression I used to see in the mirror when I was 14, tight, uncertain, trying to swallow emotion before it swallowed her. I didn't want to compete, I said. I know, she murmured, but I did. The silence after that wasn't cold. It was cleansing. Dad shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but I want to understand. I want to learn who you are now. Elena re-entered just then, a bag of trail mix in her hand. She froze when she saw the three of us standing there. Oh, she said. Should I? No, I said quickly. You're part of this. She smiled. That small, proud smile that had carried me through storms. This is Elena, I said, facing my dad and sister, my business partner, my best friend. The person who reminded me I wasn't crazy when I wanted to make dresses out of tablecloths. Elena waved awkwardly. Hi. Sophia gave her a polite nod. My dad extended his hand. Thank you, he said, for believing in her when we didn't. Elena didn't take his hand. She just said, I didn't do her a favor, I just saw what was already there. That landed harder than any lecture. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. I brought this, he said, offering it. I hesitated. He opened it, and inside was a pin, gold, small, in the shape of a violin bow. I gave one to Sophia when she played her first solo, he said quietly. It was always meant to go to both of you, but I thought you'd stop being part of our legacy. I stared at it, then closed the box gently. I haven't stopped, I said. I'm just building my own. He nodded, lips pressed together. Then he stepped forward, arms opening slowly, hesitantly, for a hug. I didn't move. Not yet. Maybe someday, I said. His arms dropped, and he nodded again, this time with real acceptance. We'll talk later, I promised. Not tonight. Sophia turned to leave. You were amazing, Mia, she said. Really? And just like that, they were gone. Elena came up beside me, handing me a piece of chocolate from her bag. Well, that was intense. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah. You okay? I nodded slowly. I think I finally feel seen. Then my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, 10M proposal. Hyde Ventures ex Mia Rivera. I turned the screen to Elena. Her jaw dropped. Oh my God. I looked up, a slow smile forming. My story's just getting started. The pen shook a little in my hand, not from fear, from the weight of what it meant. The conference table was glass, sleek, spotless, and the skyline of Austin gleamed behind it like a backdrop out of a movie. Seated across from me were two attorneys, a venture capital associate, and Marissa Hyde herself, crisp blazer, confident smile, eyes like a hawk. We're ready when you are, she said. I looked at Elena, sitting beside me in a thrifted blazer 2 sizes too big. Her knee bounced beneath the table, but her smile was steady. I turned back to the papers. $10 million. $10 million. To fund the first full-scale production line of Thread Revival Studio. I signed, and just like that, our future began. After the applause, the handshakes, the congratulatory lunch that still tasted like disbelief, we walked out into the hot Texas sun, stunned into silence. Elena turned to me, squinting against the light. Should we go scream into a pillow or something? I laughed, the kind that comes from deep in the chest, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. We didn't scream. We drove straight to our new studio space, 10 times bigger than the garage. It was still dusty. The paint hadn't gone up yet, but the windows stretched from floor to ceiling, spilling light across the concrete like possibility. We stepped inside, and I just stopped. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness. We built this, I whispered. No one else, Elena said. No applause, no father's shadow, no need to prove anything anymore, just fabric and fire. We got to work immediately. 3 months later, Thread Revival Studio officially launched with a capsule collection in partnership with Bloom & Ivy, a major eco-boutique chain. Our team grew from 2 to 7, young designers, sewers, dreamers. I led meetings, I approved swatches. I sketched in the early mornings before the sun came up, just like I used to in that crumbling apartment with the flickering desk lamp. But this time, I didn't sketch in silence. I taught. Because the one thing success gave me that struggle never could was reach. That's how the Revival Youth Program was born, a mentorship circle for young teens interested in sustainable design. We partnered with high schools, local shelters, even a juvenile program for girls on probation. The first day of the program, a girl named Layla sat across from me with her arms crossed and her hoodie pulled tight over her head. She didn't speak for the first hour. Then I slid a needle and a patch of denim toward her. You don't have to talk, I said. Just create. She didn't look up, but her hands moved. She stitched quietly, carefully, like the thread was the only thing holding her together. At the end of the day, she handed me a rough, uneven patch in the shape of a phoenix. I didn't use a pattern, she said, voice barely above a breath. I just followed what felt true. My throat tightened. That's exactly what design is, I told her. We framed her patch and hung it in the new studio, right above my desk. A few weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. Carlos, can we visit sometime? I'd like to see what you've built. I stared at it for a while. My hands didn't tremble this time. I showed Elena. She just raised an eyebrow. You want them to? I think I'm ready. When they arrived that weekend, I met them in the lobby. My father looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way his presence no longer filled the room. Sophia was calmer, her hair in a simple ponytail, her eyes wide as she took in the bright space and humming machines. I gave them the tour. We walked past mood boards, recycled textile bins, workstations buzzing with the quiet hum of progress. At one point, my dad stopped beside a mannequin wearing one of our new pieces, a structured blazer made from thrifted wool and embroidered with wildflowers along the hem. This, he said softly, it's like a sonata in fabric. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Before they left, Sophia gave me a long hug. Your students are lucky, she whispered. Then they were gone. I stood alone in the lobby for a minute, watching the automatic doors slide shut behind them. And I didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, because it mattered enough. That night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking downtown. The city glowed like a quiet celebration. Elena joined me with 2 mugs of peppermint tea. "You realize what's happening, right?" she asked, handing me mine. "What?" "You're not just building clothes anymore." I turned to her. "You're building legacy." I thought about Layla's Phoenix, about the way my team laughed during fittings, about how my sketchbook still filled up faster than I could sew, and I realized she was right. I had found my light, and it was never theirs to give. The next day, we received an invitation, a TEDx event in Austin. They wanted me to speak. "Tell your story," the organizer had written. "Let others see themselves in it." I held the letter in my hands, heart pounding. This wasn't a runway. This was a stage, and I wasn't walking it as a designer. I was walking it as a voice, a mirror, a spark. The rehearsal was in a week, but the real moment was still to come. The room was warm, not hot, just full of people, full of lights, full of breath. Rows of strangers leaned forward in their seats beneath the glowing TEDx letters on the backdrop. Some clutched notebooks, others clasped their hands tight in their laps. Everyone's face carried the same question in their eyes. Is she going to be worth listening to? I stood backstage, the microphone already clipped to my collar, my name announced, my cue just seconds away. I could still feel the pinch of the earpiece, the hum of the crowd. I could still feel my heartbeat tapping out a rhythm that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with truth. The curtain parted. I stepped out, not in heels, not in a designer label. I wore jeans stitched from 8 pairs of donated denim, hand-dyed by the students in our Revival Youth program. My top was a wrap blouse made from a discarded tablecloth, hemmed with uneven stitches I'd deliberately left raw. I walked to center stage and paused. The lights hit my face like a new beginning. "My name is Mia Rivera," I said, voice steady, fingers relaxed by my sides. "And I'm not a quitter." A few eyebrows lifted. Someone in the front row smiled. "But I did walk away," I continued, "from the applause, from the expectations, from a future that was supposed to make my family proud, but was never mine to begin with." I told them the story, not all the details, but the core, the 14-year-old with the perfect violin technique and the quiet sketches tucked in her coat pocket, the slam of her father's fist on the table, the words coward, quitter, disappointment that carved themselves into her bones. I told them about the garage, the broken sewing machines, the sleepless nights fueled by turmeric tea and second-hand ambition, and the dresses, stitched from scraps and stitched from pain, dresses that didn't ask permission, that didn't wait to be taken seriously. I told them about Elena, about the day she handed me a needle and said, "You don't need their permission." And I told them about the runway, the applause, the stunned faces in the front row. I told them the truth, that success isn't always about rising. Sometimes it's about returning to what you buried, picking it up, holding it gently, sewing it back into yourself. "I didn't get here because I was the best," I said. "I got here because I refused to disappear." I stepped closer to the edge of the stage. If you're sitting here tonight wondering if it's too late to start over, to speak up, to be seen, it's not. You don't need the world's approval to start living your truth. You just need to stop apologizing for wanting it. The room went still. Then a single clap broke the silence, then another, and then the room filled with the sound of something that felt more than applause. It felt like agreement. After the talk, people lined up to speak to me. Some just held my hand. Others cried. One woman whispered, "Thank you for saying what I never could, but one moment stays with me." It came near the end. A teenage girl approached, eyes wide, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. She was one of our mentorship students, Delia. 14, shy, always sketching in the corner. "I made this," she said, unwrapping the bundle. It was a small dress, doll-sized, made from linen scraps and stitched with mismatched buttons down the back. It was clumsy and beautiful and alive. "You changed my life," she whispered. "I thought I was invisible, but then I saw you." I couldn't speak. I just took the dress, nodded, and hugged her. That night, back at the studio, I stood by the display shelf in our entryway, beside Layla's Phoenix patch, beside the framed Vogue article, beside a photo of our first boutique rack. And I added Delia's dress. It sat there like a seed, Proof that legacy wasn't a thing you leave behind. It's a thing you pass on while you're still here. As the months passed, our studio grew. So did our program, so did the stories. We launched a second mentorship circle in Houston, then one in Oakland. We hosted design camps for girls from communities the fashion world never noticed. We didn't teach them to be perfect, we taught them to be themselves. At our final show of the year, I stood at the edge of the stage once more, not as the headliner, as a mentor. As my girls walked the runway, their faces radiant, their designs stitched with boldness and second chances, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace. My father sat in the front row. This time, his hands never stopped clapping. Sophia was next to him, her phone raised to capture every second. After the show, he came up to me. No tie, just a worn blue blazer and eyes that finally matched mine. "You've given them more than I ever gave you," he said quietly. I touched his arm. "You gave me music," I said. "I just rewrote the melody." He smiled, faint and proud. We didn't need more words. As I watched my students hug their families, their faces beaming, I turned toward the camera crew filming our behind-the-scenes documentary. "Chase what sets your soul on fire," I said into the mic. "Even if they turn away, especially if they turn away. Because sometimes, the ones who walk away are the ones who build the bridges others cross. Sometimes being called a quitter is just the beginning of the most honest thing you'll ever do. So if you're listening, if you've ever doubted your dream, your voice, your place, listen closer. You don't need permission. You just need to begin. And if this story moved you, if you saw yourself in it even just for a moment, share it. Subscribe. Tell your story in the comments below. Because the world doesn't change from the top. It changes from the threads we stitch together, one brave voice at a time.